Hey guys, and welcome back to my channel. My name is Melissa Siegel, and I'm a professor of migration studies, and this is a channel about all things migration. So today we're going to continue with our series on migration snapshots. And what we do in migration snapshots is zoom in on a very specific country using the Knowledge Center on Migration and Demography's Atlas of Migration. And we look at a specific snapshot of a country. And we zoom in on the specific snapshot of a specific migration situation in a European country. And today we are looking at Spain. So what are we going to do? We are going to look specifically at the population of emigrants and immigrants. We will look at residence permits and visas issued. We'll look at asylum applications. We'll also look at one measure of irregular migration. We'll also check out citizenship and naturalization rates, as well as some indicators of social inclusion, and then also look at education and employment. So let's start off with looking at some population parameters. So in Spain, there are around 47 million people, and of those 47 million people, around 7% are from non-EU countries. So around 7.5% are coming from outside of the European Union, so immigrants from outside of Europe. At the same time, we have around 3.6% of the population who is a European immigrant. And so that means that around 11% of the Spanish population is made up of immigrants. And at least that was the case in 2020, and this is based on Eurostat data. Now, if we look at annual flows of migrants, so again, there's a difference between stocks of migrants and flows of migrants. If you want to learn more about that, of course, you can check out my other video where I look specifically at stocks and flows. But now if we look specifically at annual flows, so this is in 2018, and that means the number of people who entered or left the country in a given year. And what you can see here with regard to immigration is that we can see 69% of the people who entered Spain in 2018 were from outside of the European Union, while 31% were from within the European Union. If we look at emigration, or people that are leaving Spain, you can see again that the people that left Spain, around 2/3 or 60%, were going to countries outside of the EU, while 40% were going to countries within the EU. So again, difference between immigration, people coming in, and emigration, people leaving the country. If we also turn now to first residence permits, we can look at the differences between 2016 and 2019 as to the reason the first residence permit was issued. And this could be work, family, education, or other reasons. And what you can see very clearly between 2016 and 2019 is that the main first residence permits that were issued were based on family reasons. So this is mainly family formation or family reunification. If we look, though, at valid residence permits at the end of the year, so in total over all of the different categories, again, the family category still stands out very heavily, but also we have 51% of people holding a valid residence permit for other reasons. So this could also be reasons like refugee status, for example. Moving off of refugees and forced migration, let's look at first-time asylum-seeking applications, all right? And again, we can look at between 2016 and 2019. And what you can see also here pretty clearly is that the applications between men and women are split a bit equally, a bit more men than women, but compared to some other countries, this is more of an even split between men and women seeking asylum. If you also look at first instant decisions, you can see between 2016 and 2018, many of, especially in 2017, 2018, many of these first instance decisions were rejections, meaning that many of the people who were asking for refugee status were rejected for their claim. In 2019, however, only 34% were rejected and 61% were accepted on humanitarian grounds. So we really saw a shift over time. Now, one indicator of irregular migration is to look at the difference between people who are ordered to leave the country and people that actually leave the country, right? So being ordered to leave means you no longer have the right to stay and you are supposed to leave the country. So if we look at the difference here, we can see that between 2016 and 2019, really only between 20% and 37% of people who were ordered to leave or told they had no right to stay in the country actually left. And of course, then the difference there are people that often end up in irregularity. So as far as we know, they're people that are still in Spain that do not have the right to stay there. Now we can turn our attention to naturalization. So what does naturalization mean? That means someone that actually has citizenship from another country, or maybe doesn't even have citizenship at all, and actually gains the citizenship of a country. In this case, we're looking at Spain, and you can see of foreign citizens who have acquired citizenship during these years between 2015 and 2018, it was mainly non-EU citizens that actually gained citizenship. And that makes a lot of sense, as in many other countries in Europe, we see in general higher rates of citizenship acquisition by people who are non-European citizens, because for them, there is a greater benefit and a greater payoff to gaining citizenship, since European citizens already in general have most of the same rights as, in this case, Spanish citizens. So there's a much larger payoff for people who are not from the European Union to gain citizenship. If you also see the share of foreign citizens who have acquired citizenship between 2015 and 2018, again broken down by EU citizens and non-EU citizens, you can see here it's not huge numbers. So in 2016, we saw the highest numbers between 2015 and 2018, and there it was still around 6% of the population actually acquired citizenship. Now we can look at some indicators of social inclusion, and let's start off first with looking at income. So here we can see the incomes, the yearly incomes of nationals, EU immigrants, and non-EU immigrants. And what you can see very clearly is that in general, nationals have much higher incomes than European immigrants and non-European immigrants. If we look at rates of overcrowding in the household, so that's really looking at how many people are living within a household and in a certain square meter radius, what we see here is that non-EU immigrants have a much higher overcrowding rate than European immigrants and nationals. If we look at some other indicators of social inclusion, specifically more poverty indicators, we can see here that the risk of poverty and social exclusion for people over 18 and also of children is higher for immigrants than it is for national citizens. So we do see that immigrants in general are at greater risk of poverty than nationals. Then we can actually look at education. So if we look at education here split by nationals, European immigrants, and non-EU immigrants, what we see is that nationals generally have higher levels of high education than both other groups. EU immigrants generally have more mid-level education than the other groups, and those coming from outside of the EU are more represented as having low education. But they still do have medium level and higher levels of education with about 50%. So 50% or slightly more than 50% of the non-European immigrant population does have medium or higher levels of education. Now let's look at some labor market outcomes. And the most typical outcomes that we look at here are unemployment, employment rates, long-term employment. We can also break this down by different levels of education. So what we can first see here is that we don't see really large differences with regard to employment rates between some groups. But what we do see amongst youngsters is that, so youngsters meaning between the ages of 15 and 24, that immigrants do have higher rates of employment than nationals. And if we flip it, in that same age category, though, you can also see that there are higher rates of unemployment for some of these categories also, but it's actually quite mixed. We actually see lower rates of unemployment among this youth group that are coming from within Europe. If we look at the age range that is most common to look at, between 25 and 49, we also see here that there are not very large differences, especially among men, between Spanish and other European immigrants. However, immigrants coming from outside of the EU do have lower rates of employment, and we see that also for the next age category from 50 to 64. And of course, unemployment rates do a similar mirroring here. So immigrants from outside of the EU do have higher unemployment rates than the other groups in the main 25 to 64 age categories. When it comes to long-term unemployment rates, though, here we see a little bit of a change. And when it comes to long-term unemployment, we do see that the natives or the Spanish nationals are more represented in longer-term unemployment. Now, if we break this down by different education levels, which makes a lot of sense because education is often highly correlated with the ability to find jobs and have opportunities in the labor market, what you can see here is if we look just at people with high education, then the Spanish native population is really having the highest rates of employment compared to the other groups. If we look at the middle level, then actually European immigrants have higher rates of employment, as well as male immigrants coming from outside of the EU. But the numbers are a bit more similar there with nationals. And if we look at those on a low education level, we actually see that at least for men, it looks very similar across the different groups. And for women, we see higher rates of employment among the EU mobile people or workers often in this case. So we do see kind of a different picture across different education levels and across nationals, European immigrants, and immigrants coming from outside of the European Union. Now, I hope this just gave you a very quick snapshot of what's going on in Spain today. If you're interested in other countries, of course, you can check out that playlist right there where we look at other countries in the European Union. And if you like this video, of course, please make sure to like, subscribe to the channel, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss any of my videos that come out every week. And I hope to see you next time. Bye-bye.